This memory came up recently and it made me realize how much I miss the early moments on this app. Many of you have asked me to bring back what I lovingly call the Christian Karen wig. I just can't. It made me think of when someone asked Sarah Cooper to do her Trump lip syncing and she said, "I'm sorry, I just can't." I never resonated more with something than when she said that. No, I'm not putting myself on the same level with Sarah Cooper, but I realized that I just needed to take a breath. So instead of making any content this weekend, this is me out in the garden, and I was a sweaty hot mess for several hours, and I loved it. But then I thought, well, maybe now I can write something that I hope would be inspirational for you. And the writing that inspires this video is called Mind the Gap. But if you're not in the mood for any of that, you can scroll on. I know I'm not the only one who feels a sense of responsibility to help people understand that we are facing a crisis so big because our country may literally collapse, and I'm not being hyperbolic. One thing that I did used to do is offer some kind of Sunday inspirational post, and this is the closest thing that I can get to it right now. I have been thinking a lot about 2020 and when we were under the guidance of the most incompetent president facing an unprecedented pandemic, who was musing that light could just kill it, or even worse, that maybe some kind of disinfectant injection could kill it. And now here we are in 26, and apparently we've learned nothing, because here we are again under the same leadership who is even more incompetent. If there ever was a testament to the power of Christian patriarchal indoctrination, it is this: that the unwavering belief that Donald Trump is somehow ordained by God to usher in the return of Jesus. Actually, I'm writing about that in a piece that's going to come out later this week called The Gullibility of Christians, so you can be looking for that. And then, of course, the disintegration of church and state separation to prioritize Christian nationalism as the only authorized voice to speak on behalf of all faith tradition. But it is such an important part of the path that informs what I write about each day, and it points me to the places where the understories are. I want you to find the thread to Christian patriarchy that is behind everything in our country. And that is where my mind went when I started to write this piece that I called Mind the Gap. I also know that I'm not the only one that probably lies in bed upon awakening, and I just stare at the ceiling and I keep wondering how all of this will end. And I know the word "this" is doing a lot of heavy lifting, because it holds this slow spiral into fascism. I kind of see words floating across the ceiling that describe this slow spiral, that describe how I'm feeling and what will eventually turn into a writing or a video script, one crisis layered on top of another, so that our attention fractures and nothing is held long enough to fully reckon with it. This is all intentional. Underneath it all, the quiet questions keep returning. How much has already shifted without us noticing, and how much will shift while we are too exhausted to see it? These are the things that threaten to overwhelm and exhaust me, and I'm sure you're the same way, because I sense this spiral getting tighter and tighter. We're moving faster towards the ultimate end, which, if they get their way, it'll be fascism in its purest form, with a healthy blend of kleptocracy and authoritarianism. I'm not a history or sociology expert, but that's the labels that I often hear when I listen to those who are. Regardless, I know a dying democracy when I see one, and we are it. So I try to take this deep breath, and I fill my lungs, and I expand my belly upward, and I set my intentions for the day ahead to do my part to ensure this democracy remains on life support. And if each of us do our part, I still have hope. I know some people will think that's crazy. Go ahead and label me insane for believing that good can prevail. And I'll respond that if hope means I'm crazy, then I'll wear the label proudly, honorably even. So then I know it's time to get up, and I'll make my mental checklist for the day. I want to support Black educators and learn from them. I'm going to read the news, and I'll listen to news stories as I'm doing my daily activities around the house. I'll find the relevancy in those stories so I can teach it to deconstructing Christians. I'll write my next blog on sacred activism, and I'll record and edit the accompanying video. And then I'll get to as many as I can of emails, comments, and of course I'll block all the trolls. And then I'll lather, rinse, and repeat. And there are days when I don't feel like I can do it, but I take this work seriously. So if I'm not writing, these words are dancing in my head, asking to be organized into some kind of cohesiveness that would make sense to you. That's what I've been trying to do for years, whether I had a Christian Karen wig on and I could dance to something silly or a trending sound. It's just right now I can't find the humor in it. Sometimes there are so many words dancing in my head that they often elude me before I even make it to the computer or a post-it note to write them down. But I have to remember that the thing that I do seek, time to research, time to write, which I could do for hours, that can be the very thing that contributes to my instability and my lack of well-being. Because if I sit too long, my legs stiffen and my back aches, especially after my surgery. I open way too many tabs, 65 as of this morning. I even took a screenshot of it. I go down way too many rabbit holes that I forget what I was researching at the beginning. My dog will sleep beside me, waiting for the walk that may or may not come if I admittedly or embarrassingly forget, because I keep opening tabs. Sometimes I even forget to drink water. And if I'm going to be really honest, in the middle of the personal crisis that only a handful of you here know, but I've alluded to a couple of times, I forgot to even eat. I have for way too many days or even years allowed the urgency of this moment within a dying democracy to jeopardize my well-being. But recently my daughter said to me, "It's time, Coco." That is a phrase that we've used in our family for years, and it's in honor of a stubborn beagle mix that we were lucky to have until she was 17. And we would say that to her so often because she would find a way to grab the sandwich from the grandchild or steal a cake that I had baked off the counter. And she refused to go into her crate when it was time, so we were constantly screaming, "It's time, Coco." But God, I miss that dog. Because of her and her stubbornness, I realized she was my mirror because she just kept going all the time. She kept me in shape. I had to run with her 5 and 6 hours, and she'd come home and be like, "Is that it? Is that all we're doing?" I think that's why I called this writing Mind the Gap. Because many of you who've traveled to London, you see that all over the place. And it's that space between the train and the platform. And the sign itself has evolved into a cultural symbol. But metaphorically, it's a quiet warning to stay alert to what isn't immediately visible. The subtle risks, the overlooked dangers, the places where we could easily misstep if we're not paying attention. So somewhere between "It's time, Coco" and Mind the Gap, I just needed to pause and not make any videos until today. Mind the Gap stays with me and it calls to me when something is off and needs attention. Look, I know this is rambling. I am never going to be the one who's going to give you 5 ways to inner peace. That's just not what I do. Nothing wrong if you're that kind of teacher, but I'm sorry to disappoint you. If you haven't figured it out by now, my thoughts are messy and they're layered and they're sporadic and they pull me in many different ways, and I refuse to be labeled as flawed because of it. This magnificent brain has gifted me with sentences that astonish me. Oh, I cannot believe I'm crying. But here's the thing that astounds me the most about the elusivity of peace that many of us are experiencing right now. This very thing, what's happening in our country, this moment that we're in, it's empowering me. What do I mean by that? For similar reasons that I knew that in 2015 that Trump would indeed be elected president. And I knew that after the election in 2024 that things were going to get very bad in America. Both times I had friends and family and a ton of followers mock me when I said he would win in 2015 and in 2024 when I said prepare for what is coming. And now we see global supply chains falling apart and gas prices high and inflation increasing. And now I'm not the only one realizing that we are at risk of seeing massive waves of food shortages and supply disruptions that our country has never experienced. And that foreshadowing of the impending crisis has resulted in my becoming, and I can't believe I'm even going to say this, but I am an accidental homesteader. I'm not that kind of homesteader. If you spend any time on any homesteading social media, you know what I mean, because there's a ton of vaccine denying, immigrants are to blame for everything, and Democrats are evil types of homesteader. I don't want anything to do with them. I block them. I even cringe at the label of homesteader because I just have a garden and I'm preparing for chickens. And yeah, I'm remembering how to can and freeze like my grandmother did. But as it turns out, it's a return to my childhood because my grandfather was a dairy farmer and my grandmother's garden fed us and many of the neighbors. And it harkens back to a time when milk just sat in buckets on the table. And no, I'm not telling you to drink raw milk now, Jesus Christ. Butter sat on the counter and eggs sat in bowls on the table. And I remember all the countless mud pies I made while the adults toiled in the fields and with the cows. That comes flooding back as I kneel down to take care of the potatoes and the broccoli and the cabbage and the okra, and I don't even remember everything I've got planted. But by tending to these needs of everything growing, I'm tending to something needing healed inside of me. I'm not listening to the political podcasts, I'm listening to the birds, and I'm walking my dog. And I accept the melody of nature. It's music to my soul. I cut the flowers I've grown and I put them in vases, and I'm reminded that creation invites us to pause and wonder at its beauty. I'm lifting weights and I'm reminding my body that it is still strong and capable of incredible things. I'm also stretching my body, and I have no choice but to pause and breathe into those poses and remember the mantra asking to be said, which is, be still and know that even if it's just for a moment, that all is well. And then I take my tea out to the bench on my porch to watch the birds frolic in the fountain. And I just took my houseplants outside. How divine is this? So I pause and I look upward and I give thanks to something that is beyond my understanding. And I'm reminded that goodness, kindness, compassion, and empathy are the way to a more just and equitable humanity. That is all, beautiful soul. This is all I have to offer you for today. Just remember, it's time, Coco. Mind the gap and step away from the fire, even if it's just long enough to tend to some seedlings inside you or near you. Even though the tears are coming, my thoughts are clear, and these words that need to be written are still dancing in my head, but they're dancing more freely. And my breath is smoother and my mind is calmer. I close with this. I don't know what tomorrow brings for me or you or the world, but I do know this. Collective resistance will arise from those who believe we are worth saving. Mind the gap. Step over the chaos and return to self in whatever way that is healing and meaningful for you. May it be so. Now, if this video resonates with you, I do have a writing on Substack called Mind the Gap, and be sure to follow me on all my platforms so we can stay connected.